In this lesson, we're going to learn how to do some basic console programming with Java Inventor. So after having launched the application, I'm just going to create a new project, and I'll call this first test. And I'll open that. So we have an empty project here, and I'll go ahead and say go to Javi School and get the documentation. And so I'm going to go ahead and bring this up as a separate application so we can use it. I'll move that to the side, and I'll go ahead and close that run window there. So in our documentation, we'll start with console programming, and the first thing we're going to do is create a new Java starter file. So this is a very simple Java file that'll get us started. I'll go ahead and go back to the home page and say create a new starter file, and I'll call this Hello World. So this brings up our first Java class, and it has a main method here, so it's a stub, so we can go ahead and get started. And it's showing our first command, print line, which does exactly what it sounds like. It's going to print whatever we put in here. So let's go ahead and change this to the customary first program that people will learn called Hello World. Let's just write in Hello World. And we'll save this and hit run. So our console comes up and it just says Hello World. So we've got our first program there. Make this a little smaller. So the second page of our documentation here shows what we just did. Created a new file. Now something interesting here that we should note whenever we do any programming, when we click on certain objects, we see a documentation button up here. So here when I click on the Javi console, and our first class Hello World is a Javi console, it gives us the option to bring up the Javi console documentation. So I'll go ahead and click documentation here, and it should launch Safari, and it brings up the documentation for our console. So here we see everything that our console can do, all the commands or methods. So we can set the font size, we can tell it to print or print line or set color or set font name. So that's just good to know that when in doubt, if we see this button, we can click on it and see our documentation. So the first thing we're going to do other than print is let's go ahead and customize our console a little bit. So there's the methods I mentioned, set font size and set color. And they're in standard methods or commands in Java. We have to make sure we get the spelling right, and for methods they all have parameters inside of parentheses. So we have to make sure that we balance the parentheses, and we have to make sure that every line ends with a semicolon. And whenever we're typing in a text parameter, we need to make sure that it is surrounded by quotation marks, and that again the quotation marks are balanced. So let's go ahead and type in these two lines here. Set font size, and you'll see that it tries to complete for us. So if I just hit return when it selects the right method, I can go ahead and set the font size to something and put a semicolon there, and then I'll say set color, and I'm going to go ahead and choose light blue. So now we have our print Hello World, and we're setting our background color, and we're setting a font size. So again, we save and we run, and now we have our console with larger text and a blue background. So let's go ahead and move on. So the next step is getting input. So instead of declaring what color we want the background, let's go ahead and ask the user for a color. So before we set the color, let's go ahead and say we'll declare a variable. So we have to have something to store our response. So our variable is called color, and it's of type string, which is a text type. And we'll go ahead and say get input string. And so this method takes some text, which is the prompt, which is what we're going to ask the user. So we'll go ahead and say enter a color name. And I'll put in a colon and a space. So this method will ask the user to enter in a color name. We'll get that color, and then we'll go ahead and set it by replacing this static text string with our new variable color. So we'll do a save, and we'll do a run. And so now our console comes up, and we can say pink. And we get our hello world with a pink background. So now let's go ahead and use our input. Instead of getting text input, let's get some number inputs, and we'll create a simple calculator. So we'll write a program that might actually be useful if we're in math class. So I'm going to go ahead and delete everything here, and I'm going to declare a variable. Now Java has primarily number variables and text variables. And just like in mathematics, there are whole numbers and there are decimal or real numbers. And Java calls the simplest whole number an integer, or int for short. So I'll go ahead and declare a variable called x, and I'll go ahead and say get input int. And I'll go ahead and tell the user to enter a number. And then I'm going to do that again. Get input int, enter another. And now I'm going to do a mathematical operation on this. So I'm going to create a new variable z, and I'm going to say z is equal to x plus y. And then we'll just tell the user, so we'll print line, the sum is, and we'll go ahead and just say, we'll add our text string here, we'll add the z value to it, and it'll automatically format that for us. So we'll save, and we'll run. So now we have our simple calculator. So I can say 22 plus 33 is equal to 55. So we'll go on to the next thing is we want an add and multiply calculator. So now let's go ahead and copy this method here, because we're going to reuse it. This is very common in programming. So this one, and in fact I'm going to copy it twice. So the first one I'm going to call add, and that'll do just like we did before here. And the second one we'll call multiply. And I'll change the comments here. So you notice the comments are surrounded by, or large formal comments start with a /* and end with a /*, and they can be on multiple lines. And we'll see simpler comments later. So we'll say this is an add method. And we'll say this method multiplies two numbers. And now let's change our main method to go ahead and call these two. So let's say add and multiply. So now we'll save and we'll run. And it'll say enter number, and we can try our 22 and 33 again, and we get 55. And then this time, let's try 12 and 12. But we didn't change it. So inside of here, let's change our multiply method to say the product is, and instead of x plus y, we're going to use x times y. And notice that in Java, to signify times, instead of reusing x, we're going to use the asterisk. This is the common notation for multiplying two values in Java. So I'll save again and run. Let's try that again. So 22 plus 33, the sum is 55. And 12 times 12, the product is 144. So now we have a simple calculator. So let's move on. So far we've used whole numbers, and but we might want to make this a decimal calculator, a full decimal calculator. So like I said, whole numbers are referred to in Java as integers. Decimal numbers are called floats, and referring to the decimal point is a floating point. So we'll say, instead of get input int, we'll say get input float, and we'll do the same thing for y here. And then we'll say z is equal to x plus y, and then we'll do the same thing down here. We'll change these all to floats, and again ask for get input float. We'll save and run. And so we can now say 22.3 plus 33.4 is 55.7, or 4.4 times 3.3 is equal to 14.52. So we have a decimal calculator now. And we'll move forward. So instead of just getting those two adding and multiplying back to back, let's let the user decide what they want to do. So we'll go ahead and say our main method here. First thing is we'll go ahead and say what we are. Simple calculator. And then we'll say choice 1 is multiply. Well, we'll say, what do you want to do? And so we'll give them the choice. 1 is add, and 2 is multiply. So this is printing our menu. And then we'll say ask for a choice. So we'll say choice is equal to get input string, and we'll say enter a choice. And then we'll say if choice, so this is a conditional now, if choice is equal to 1, then add. And if choice is equal to 2, then multiply. And actually we want to get a value here, a integer value. So let's say get input int. And then after we're done, let's go ahead and clear the text of the console and just run main again. So now we have a much more complete calculator. We'll hit run, and it's simple calculator. What do we want to do? We want to add, so enter a number, 22 and 33. All right, so I cleared the text too soon here. So let's say, let's go ahead and ask for an input character. So we can just say hit any key to continue. And that way it'll pause after it does the add or multiply. So let's go ahead and run this. So we'll say we want to add, and 22 plus 33 is 55. Hit any key to continue. So we hit our key and it goes back and runs again. This time we'll say multiply, and we'll say 12 times 12 is 144. And we can keep going here. So now we have a simple calculator with a menu system. So from here, we have all the tools now to ask the user for values and do simple mathematical expressions on those values and print the result. So now you're ready if you've got math class or science class and you're doing